Let's go indeed. It's the Ben Mulroney Show, but now it's time for This Week in Politics, our midweek panel. And for that, we've got our all-stars, Andy Gibbons, principal at Wallgate Advisory, former VP at WestJet, and Regan Watts, founder of Fratton Park and former senior aide to Finance Minister Jim Flaherty. Guys, happy Wednesday.
Bonjour, Big Witch.
All right, we've got lots of stories to get to today, but the first is we're coming off of what was a very good convention, I think, for Pierre Poilievre. I think a lot of us thought he'd get 80%. I don't think a lot of us thought he'd get almost 88% of the vote. But I think more importantly, being reported that there's a change in tone, right? There's a more, it's less of a zero-sum game. It's not for me to win, you have to lose. It's let's work the problem together. And today, as actually right now, he's scheduled to be meeting with the Prime Minister to talk about the things they can work on together. And I got to ask you first. I'm going to go with you, Regan, first. What do you think of this? I don't know if this gets him where he needs to go, but does it put him on the right path?
Well, a couple of things, Ben, and it's good to be back with you. First things first, Mr. Poilievre performed well at his convention. I think that listeners of this show, who, by the way, include my wife and daughter right now, who are driving to go pick up my son, were well informed, and they knew from both Andy and I that Mr. Poilievre was going to do better than 80%, and that was, his result was 87.6 or something, and I think, that was generally speaking where those of us who follow politics as analysts thought he would end up. The change in tone is noted. I think that's driven in part by a couple of things. One is the public mood and the expectation that Canadians are having that they want their federal leaders and provincial leaders to be working together in the national interest. And so I think Mr. Poilievre, his shift and his adjustment is in that context. And then secondly, I think Mr. Poilievre has figured that maybe it's time to take a slightly different tack. Some of us have been suggesting to him, including myself, privately for, at least a year, that this might be a better approach. And I think you're seeing the response in the coverage he's getting and in how people are responding to him. And that's not to say he needs to change who he is. No. But he does need to change and has changed his approach. I think the meeting today with the Prime Minister is as much about routine parliamentary business as it is about being proactive and constructive. And Mr. Poilievre does deserve credit for taking that approach.
And Andy, I think there's politically, I think, getting ahead of what a lot of people are thinking could be an election in May. This is part of that, right? By putting water in their wine and saying, look, we're going to support things that even though they don't go as far as we want them to go, we're going to support them, like they did yesterday with the GST rebate and the crime bill. By doing that, by positioning themselves as trying to work within this minority parliament, I think it takes the wind out of the sails of the what I've noticed is the rhetoric coming from the Liberal Party, which is the Tories are obstructionist, and which means eventually this government's gonna have to fall so we can get a majority. And I in terms of holding on to the narrative and controlling it, I think this is a step in the right direction for them.
I agree, and I think they have figured out Canadians do not want them in the way of anything right now. Yeah. They believe that the Liberal government should have a broad brush to do what's needed. And the moment that the Liberals can successfully label him as obstructionist is a terrible day for federal Conservatives. So I'm really happy about it. I'm glad he's on his front foot. I'm glad he's the one requesting meetings. I'm glad he's the one stating publicly that he will pass things before Steve McKinnon and others get to force him.
Yeah.
So that is a shift in strategy and a welcome one, and one we've talked about a lot on the show about how needed it was. So I think there's more to do on that, but it's a good start and definitely shows that they're reading the same polls we are.
Oh yeah, you can't bake the cake all at once, right? You gotta build it, and so good first step. Check that box. But
good first step.
But there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. When Pierre was beaten up on Justin Trudeau, that was good until it wasn't, because they beat him up so much that he left and he was replaced with somebody that at that time Pierre couldn't beat. So there was too much of a good thing there. And now with the NDP MPP and former deputy leader of that party, of the provincial Ontario NDP, Doly Begum, who's jumping into Carney's warm embrace and going to be running in the newly vacant seat in Scarborough, Ontario, left by the former chief of police, who's now going to go to the High Commission in London. I wonder whether this idea that they're pulling people from the left, they're pulling people from the right, it gives credence to the line by Andrew Scheer last week that the Liberals are unburdened by principle. You don't have to be.
Well, but Ben.
No. Well, hold on.
Ben.
Hold on. I'm not the only one saying it. Yesterday on CTV, Bob Fife said this is liberal cynicism at its absolute worst. And
sure.
Okay. So I'm positing the question.
So what
is it too much of a good thing if you're making yourself so available that people from the left and people from the right are coming into your embrace? Yes, it could mean that you have a big tent. It could also mean that you don't stand for anything. And you attract people who don't stand for anything.
So, Ben, we all know that Liberals don't, generally speaking, have principles. Their principle is about winning elections. And so I actually agree with Mr. Scheer. And your father used to say similar things. Yep. And so, to be a cynic and to be a conservative, those of us who compete against the Liberals in elections, we know that they care about one thing and one thing only, and that is themselves and winning power. That's the cynical take. Yeah. The less cynical take, if I'm a Liberal, is, wow, we're building a big tent and we're attracting people from all political stripes. And I think, it's probably a bit of column A and a bit of column B. But as Andy knows, and he lives in Ottawa, Liberals in that town are malleable in just about any direction. The number of backflips and change of positions would embarrass, as my friend Andy Gibbons likes to say, Nadia Comaneci. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I'll yield the floor to my friend from Ottawa, West Nepean.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that hands up if you didn't have to Google Doly Begum when you heard this. Yeah. Hands up if you didn't have to Google her name.
Well, she's on the progressive wing of one of the more progressive, and I'm using that term very kindly because some would say full of crackpots, but a more progressive NDP in the country. And so she has found a home in a party that just welcomed guys who ran for the Conservative Party in the last election.
Yeah, I mean, breaking news: Liberals attract someone who thinks they can get a better job. I mean, but the point for me is, nobody knew who this woman was prior to this announcement, and all of a sudden, it's this political stroke of genius and liberal politics at its best. I'm not convinced it's not a nothing burger, to be honest with you, and I think the danger for Liberals is becoming a bit too glib and a bit too confident and a bit too cheeky about some of their moves. And I think I believe Canadians elected this prime minister not for some broad mandate, but to focus on the issues and get to a very business-like approach. Yeah. So when I start seeing Liberals really playing politics, I actually don't think that that's a good thing for them, to be honest. And I think it may come back to bite them. But I had never heard of this woman. I don't know if you two had.
I hadn't.
Never heard of her.
I hadn't either. There's some hurt feelings in the NDP. But also one last point I'll make, and then we'll go to break. Bob Fife continued. I mean, he pointed out that's the high level stuff, right? The floor crossing thing, or that's changing for political stripes, is the thing that people latch on to. But what they're not necessarily talking about is there was no nomination process. There was not. They just picked this person and threw them in, and he questioned their.
Here's the thing, Ben. Yeah. Political leaders should be given the right to recruit their team. Yeah. Political leaders in this country deserve the right to pick their team, whether it's Brian Mulroney, Mark Carney, Stephen Harper, Pierre Poilievre, Jean Chrétien. It doesn't matter. If you want somebody to run for you, yes, the grassroots, generally speaking, have a say. But if you want to bring somebody into your team, go ahead.
All right, when we come back, we're going to go to Danielle Smith, who is calling out Ottawa, saying we need some adults in the room. Alberta's got to have a say in selecting some of our judges, because what we've been seeing coming out of the judiciary is crazy town. So we'll talk about that next when the Ben Mulroney Show continues. Yep, you are. But you're also listening to Andy Gibbons and Regan Watts because it's Wednesday, which means it's our midweek This Week in Politics panel. It's a little wordy. We're working on it. Guys, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
All right. It's now, but this is the second segment. And in the second segment, it's time for...
This is the political play of the week.
Political play of the week. Regan, you're up.
I'll be very quick because I suspect Andy and I agree on this. My political play of the week is Prime Minister Stephen Harper, or former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. It was nice to see him get his flowers and receive his flowers yesterday when his portrait was unveiled. But the reason I'm selecting him as political play of the week is I actually thought his speech was magnificent. Mr. Harper is a government that I served in, working for the wee angry man, James Michael Flaherty from Whitby. And I have a lot of time and respect and affection for Mr. Harper on the basis of my early career. But his speech was nation building. He had some very thoughtful things to say. And I thought it was the right vision and voice for a perilous time in the country currently, to see him talk about Canada and the way he did, and the way he and the Prime Minister, Mr. Carney, got along and had some fun on stage, celebrating the fact that democracy will continue to thrive in this country. And so my play of the week goes to Mr. Harper.
I sent him an email congratulating when I heard that the portrait was coming out, because I remember in 2002 when Dad's portrait was put up, it was a real moment of pride, real moment of pride. So I wished him and his family the very best. And I love how they got a little cat in there too, because I know that they rescued a whole bunch of cats in 24 for years. All right, you're up, my friend Andy.
Yeah, mine's the same because, like Regan, I owe a lot of my early career to the Prime Minister. And I was lucky enough to attend the portrait ceremony yesterday, which was very touching and poignant. But for me, for all of the reasons Regan mentioned, whether it's residential schools, Quebec as a nation, fiscal prudence, national unity, this was a serious Prime Minister, and someone who's the only Prime Minister in Canadian history to take a third-party movement and transition them into a governing party, which is so notable. But I think it was also an opportunity to reflect. Because if you look at the way Liberals are talking about Prime Minister Harper this week, I think it's a reminder to all of us, including Regan and I, when we talk about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, is that, maybe we need to dial back the criticism a little bit and recognize how hard these jobs are. And that more than Regan and I ever will, Ben. But, I think it's a moment to pause and say, like, these are actually good people that are doing their best in the national interest almost all the time. Mm-hmm. And watching Liberals retract some of their, and at the time, I mean, people hated
buddy, the amount of people, the Rat Pack from the 80s, the stuff that they said about Dad, to a person, every single one of them has come to me in one way, shape, or form and told me, oh gosh, we were so crazy at the time. We're so young. We didn't know what we were doing. Like Sheila Cobb said it. Nunziata said it. They all. I get it. I've never taken issue with Justin Trudeau as a person. I know that the job is hard. I have only taken issue with him as a leader, and so I will not. And I don't talk about him now that he's out of office unless he brings himself up. So I'm not dialing it back on him. I'm absolutely not. I'm not. If anyone's going to do revisionist history on the damage that was done over the past 10 years, it ain't going to be me.
Fair. But maybe we are entering a new politics in Canada, and whether that's the Trump effect or Carney or Pierre pivoting, maybe the 2 decades of really hard-nosed partisan politics can be shaved back a little bit in this country.
I'll tell you something that I do give him credit for all the time. Is how well he treated my father. My father, because of Justin Trudeau, was the very first former prime minister of one party to ever speak to the complete caucus of another party. It had never been done before, and they treated him very well. Now, listen, it was absolutely in their self-interest as well. They had no entry points into the new U.S. administration because they'd put all their eggs in the Hillary basket. But I said at the time, I hoped it would usher in a new era in Canadian politics, because you have all of this institutional knowledge, all of these connections in one person. And the second a new party comes in, they just shut the door on that person. They don't leverage that person. They never call them. They're out. Their influence is useless to them. And I think, as you just said, in this moment where it should be all hands on deck, a guy like Stephen Harper and everyone he knows and every relationship he built should be leveraged in furtherance of the agenda that Mark Carney has before him. I've just realized I've done a lot of talking, and Regan has said nothing.
Well, no, I gave Harper his flowers as my political play of the week. I was just going to say, with respect to the way we are talking about our politics on both this show and in this particular segment, I think we need to remember a couple things. One, we are all Canadians working with our, those of us who work in politics or around government with an interest to make the country better. We have different ideas. But I think what you saw with Mr. Harper, and by the way, I do think it's part of Mr. Carney's success, is that he's approached his political career as a non-politician. And I think there's a bit of catharsis in the country after the long national nightmare known as Justin Trudeau in having a different approach. But that's part and parcel of, I think, a growing of the country. And as I've said before on this show, long may it continue.
All right. Well, let's move on to a story that I think is an important conversation to have. I think a lot of sober-minded, good faith people from all sorts of political stripes should be able to look at our judiciary and appreciate that there is an erosion in trust in this vital aspect of our country, where just yesterday in the National Post, a crack dealer with 9 kids was given a lenient sentence because even though he couldn't prove his First Nations lineage, the judge just accepted it and then talked about all the buzzwords of institutional racism and systematic racism and intergenerational trauma, and for those reasons, we're gonna treat you with kid gloves, and that's one of any number of decisions that we could look at that most people would say this is bananas, this is cuckoo town, and so the knock-on effect has been that the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, told the feds, the Justice Minister, Sean Fraser, she wants Alberta to have more say in how we pick judges because she doesn't like the people that are coming down the pike. He said, absolutely not. What do you guys think? Andy?
Oh, look, I'm with her because and just to frame this issue a little bit, let's take bail reform as an example. Every premier of this country and their respective attorney generals begged Justin Trudeau and his attorney generals to change bail reform. It was a top issue at First Ministers conferences, and they dithered, delayed, said no, obstructed, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of anger at the way the federal government has been appointing the judiciary and how they've managed these issues, not just by Danielle Smith, who has to manage her own separatist movement now, but by premiers of all colors. So there's that. Look, she has a population that feels that the values of other parts of the country are imposed on her province. I don't think
that the judiciary is demonstrating or is giving us an outcrop of any values in this country. These are not values that I don't think any Canadians have. I'm going to give the last word to Regan. You got about a minute 15.
Look, I'll say a couple of things. One, I'm with Andy, and I am 100% behind Premier Smith. I think her letter to the Prime Minister articulated a number of grievances that the West has towards how Ottawa conducts the nation's business. And judicial appointments are certainly on that list. We've had some really kooky decisions from judges with respect to bail or other decisions over the last 10, 12, 14 years.
Land claims.
I don't believe the judiciary is political, but I do believe we have some judges who have some pretty wacky views, and they should be interpreting law, not making law. With respect to the outcome, I'm not surprised to hear Minister Fraser, in his response. That would be a big Ottawa Liberal response that he provided. However, I do think that the Prime Minister has done a lot of work in trying to build bridges with the provinces, so it wouldn't surprise me if we heard in a few months from now that when the Supreme Court Justice appointment is about to be made, that he did call Premier Smith and have a conversation. I don't think what she's asking is unreasonable, and I think the Prime Minister is the kind of person who might look at the situation and say, well, how can we help manage the Federation and turn down the tone and temperature of separation and separatism in Alberta? And he's the kind of guy who'll pick up the phone and call. Yep. So we'll see. But that's my take.
Guys, thank you so much. A great conversation today. One of the best we've ever had. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Ben.
Big witch.
Thanks so much for watching the show. Now, if you enjoyed what you saw, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode of The Ben Mulroney Show.